FFM93 Live.
All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Here, FFM93 Live is back. We got a good amount to talk about today for Friday, September 9th, 2022. So when I last left off, we were a couple of months ago kind of finishing out, development camp and all that stuff. And um, it's been a bit. Some things have happened. We went through all of the free agency and all that stuff, and now we're kind of in the couple of weeks here into September. We're getting into these stages of more of the waiting game, essentially, of now when is everything going to start happening, and all of that stuff. So, a couple things for today. A couple things that the Flyers have actually put out. So we have the throwback Thursdays, the theme nights, promotional schedule, some Tortorella comments. We have the rookie camp, and then the games in a week, all that stuff, and then training camp the following week, and then the Beyond the Boards series, which is episode 1 that came out with Wade Allison. So we'll be talking about that, and then Dave Jackson. I actually recorded that interview back in August. Dave Jackson is the rules analyst for ESPN on their TV coverage, and Dave was really good. Honestly, really enjoyed the entire conversation from Dave. We talked about a lot of stuff, so you'll hear that full interview. It's about 45 minutes or so, and then we got a couple callers as well. But let's get into some of the promotional stuff that the Flyers put out, because I want to go over a couple of these. So Flyers announced today their promotional schedule for the 2022-23 season, and also single game tickets will be going on sale soon, all that stuff. So the full Flyers, essentially the full promotional schedule, it always kind of ranges, like every year there's always like that that kind of weird giveaway. Like last year there was the Ryan Ellis Chia Pet, all that stuff. So it starts off opening night. The home opener of the opening night t-shirt. Thursday, October 22nd is the 60s and 70s Throwback Thursday. Saturday, October 29th is the Halloween Spooktacular. So there's three promotional nights in October, 3 in November. Those games are November 8th. That's a Flyers Charities game against St. Louis. Military Appreciation Day, Sunday, November 13th against Dallas. Calgary, that's Monday, November 21st. That's Hockey Fights Cancer Night. So Hockey Fights Cancer is on a Monday this year. You have a couple for December. 80s Throwback Thursday, Flyers Hot Cocoa Mug Night, which I thought was pretty cool. That's against the Avalanche. Star Wars Night, which Kevin Weeks ended up tweeting out earlier for the Flyers there. You have the Holiday Spectacular against the Rangers. Later in December on the 17th, 90s Throwback Night early in January against the Arizona Coyotes. Pride Night against Anaheim in January. You have 2000s Throwback Thursday. That is against Chicago. You have the Winter Hat giveaway. That is January 22nd. Gritty Hula Dancer. I thought that was pretty weird. So again, like I said, there's always that kind of weird giveaway. That is Monday, February 6th against the Islanders. 2010's Throwback Thursday. That is against the Oilers. Marvel Superhero Day, they did that last year against Chicago. That is February 11th against Nashville. And then there's a couple more here in March to end out the year. Flyers Ice Cube Mold, which is presented by Coors Light. So that'll be pretty cool. St. Patrick's Day, All Decades Throwback Thursday, season ticket member appreciation night, and Sean Couturier bobblehead night. So there is a bobblehead for the first time in a couple years. I believe the last bobblehead was, I think it was Provorov. I'm not too sure though. But again, there's a lot of promotional nights this year, which is obviously the Flyers have to sell tickets, and they're probably very low in that category, right, of selling tickets and getting people to buy them and all that stuff. Unfortunately, with how frustrated everybody is, that's kind of the way it is. But again, I mean, for most of this year, there's a lot of different stuff, and then again, you have the Throwback Thursdays. So it's 6 games. So again, Flyers announced first ever Throwback Thursday series for 22-23. So each of the 6 Throwback Thursday games will celebrate a different era of Flyers hockey, including a special decade-themed custom Flyers print. In-game elements will include historic Flyers footage, alumni appearances, and return of an in-arena organist. Again, the Philadelphia Flyers have an incredibly proud and rich history, and these throwback games are a great way to celebrate that history and connect today's players and fans with different eras of the Flyers past, said Brad Marsh, the president of the Flyers Alumni Association. So in celebration of the earlier eras of Flyers hockey at each game, the team will bring Flyers history to fans with the special guest members of the Flyers alumni. Again, the footage and all that stuff, the in-arena organist. There's be throwback food, beverage, retail items, and then fans will also receive an exclusive decade-themed custom Flyers print. I do apologize. There's a plane going by right now, as the airport is not far from my house. Anyway, so the team will also wear the 2022-23 reverse retro jerseys at select Throwback Thursday games. The Flyers trainers and staff will also sport custom retro jackets on the bench. So pretty cool. Again, those games are Thursday, October 27th against Florida. That's 60s, 70s Throwback Thursday. I know I just mentioned these, but I'll just relay them again. Thursday, December 1st against Tampa Bay. That is 80s Throwback Thursday. Thursday, January 5th versus the Coyotes. That's 90s. January 19th against Chicago, 2000s. February 9th versus Edmonton, 2010s, and March 23rd against Minnesota is all eras. So that's all eras of Flyers hockey right there. And again, it seems like that, like, to me, I like that stuff. Again, we have not seen the reverse retro jersey. I am still trying to find some more stuff on that, and I have not been able to. But again, I'm very excited for that to come out. It seems like the players are having a sort of these new gloves. I keep seeing them, and they've been all over, whether it was Twitter. I mean, I've tweeted them out a handful of times, and there's been a bunch of stuff on that as well. But again, I mean, this stuff is cool to me. I mean, look, I mean, having an in-arena organist, I think that's going to be really neat, and I would love to see them keep it. If I'm being honest with you, because again, the organ in a hockey game just makes everything better. But again, I like this stuff because, again, it kind of brings everybody back, and for how last year in the alumni game was, I didn't really love how the alumni game was presented, if I'm being honest with you, but that's just me. But again, that is something that they will be doing this year. Again, it is only a handful of games. But let's get into some comments from Twitter. I also got a call from my dad, actually, about this too. So let's play that now.
Yo, Chris, it's your dear old dad here. Got a question for you. Curious as to your thoughts about Tortorella's statement about having not being in a rush to name a captain and having major concerns about the room, especially his part about accountability in the room. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Peace.
All right, so before I actually get into my answer, I want to pull up the actual quote. So obviously quotes always get dissected and put in different areas. So TSN had tweeted John Tortorella, and again, he was on Sirius Radio, and they asked him essentially about the room and kind of how everything has gone, and if they're going to be naming a captain anytime soon. He said, "I have major concerns about the room. You can't get squat done on the ice until you get your room straight, and I think we have a little bit of work to do there." Now that was not the full quote. So again, if you go and you look at again, now I tweeted this out earlier, but Bill Meltzer actually had a great article, basically dissecting all of this. And again, to me, this is not something Tortorella is just mentioning. Like, this is something that has been talked about before. It's not, like, look, I understand that there's work to do. I mean, he didn't really say anything that he hasn't said before. And, me personally, I kind of look at it like, okay, like, I'm perfectly fine with somebody openly admitting that, because I don't think anybody said this was going to be easy. And, look, when you're looking at a team like this that's coming off of a tough year, and a really tough year, I should say, and you need that kind of spark. I mean, Atkinson pretty much said the same thing, and I was thinking of that as well, and Bill said it in the article too. In Atkinson's case, he said it back on exit day. Again, this is from Bill Meltzer's article from the Hockey Buzz. He said, Atkinson mentioned here, quote unquote, man, anything that could have gone wrong went wrong this year. We did a good job. Not a good job, but a decent job at sticking together through the worst time. We all have to hold each other accountable. So right there, Atkinson already mentioned we have to hold more guys accountable. It's a pretty crappy feeling being out of the playoffs by January, Atkinson said. And then he paused, continued, said, every guy's got to look hard in the mirror and realize we want to be in this spot again. What an embarrassment it was for the organization, the fan base, and the city itself. It's hard to build a culture with an organization, and it's just as easy to lose that. We need to find a way to stick together and build that winning culture. Coming to the rink and expecting to win, not hoping to win. I'm just embarrassed, I guess. That's a crappy feeling, almost a waste of a year in my mind. So obviously, look, this has been relayed before. It's not like we've never heard this or anything like that. And when a player is essentially saying this, he basically avoided, and again, Bill said this in the article too. He's practically saying, like, he's not going to go out and handpick, well, this guy doesn't do it and that guy doesn't do it, and not finger point. But he's just basically saying they have to, be better at this. And, he wasn't going to throw guys under the bus, all that stuff. So again, Tortorella has said this too. He's talked about this before. And Atkinson lobbied for Tortorella on exit day. I've talked about that before. He also said from the outside, which was confirmed by Chuck, Briere, others, the Flyers locker room last year was not a bastion of unity. He noted that when he first got to Columbus, he said, quote unquote, I didn't like the room, and he set out to change, which was he tried to change that, and he did. So again, right, I think there are some other things. If you're just looking at certain quotes, I think it's harder, because when you try and you only try to dissect one thing, but you have to kind of read through the lines. I think that's what Bill's trying to say here in this article too, because again, I think it makes it clearer. I didn't really understand why everybody was kind of tweeting about it and be like, oh my God, like, why is he saying this? Like, it's not like it's rocket science or we've never seen this before. I think it was pretty clear that, and again, I'm not going to try and sit here and make like I know what goes on in the room, because I have no idea. But from the play on the ice, I think it was pretty clear that you could tell that, certain guys weren't being held accountable. This was the full kind of quote. He said, I have major concerns about the room. He said, I spent some time in the summer going back and forth to Philly trying to relocate, but he spent time in the office talking to players, talking to personnel, talking to Chuck and all the front office, and he has major concerns about what goes on in there. He said, before we step on the ice, situations and standards and accountability in the room is forefront. You can't get squat down on the ice until you get your room straightened out, and I think we have a little bit of work to do there. It's 100% true. And this sentence right here, this kind of thing that Bill put in here, he says, an important issue worth discussing and monitoring, absolutely. And an indictment of the failure of last offseason strategy to inject more leadership, primarily by adding several players to the roster who'd worn a letter for other teams, probably. So that is pretty much essentially what the issue was, is that you added too many guys that were just like, oh, well, I was a leader here, that whole kind of thing, and it just didn't work out. And unfortunately, they're trying to a new thing. Again, it's not something that Tortorella has not mentioned before. I 100% agree with that. He's said it before, and I was really concerned why, not even really concerned, but just curious why everybody was kind of making it such a big deal. Because again, it's been said before. It's not like we haven't heard this, once or twice. It's like, okay, we understand that there's going to be some things that we got to change here. And for Tortorella, he's pretty blunt, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Instead of him saying, oh no, the room's fine, I'd rather him say this. So I'm perfectly fine with it. And I have no issues with that whatsoever, but I do want to, I know it's a really long answer and a lot of quotes, but I do want to get into the next caller here too.
Hey, Chris, it's Sean. With all the videos you've been dropping lately, you've gotten me a little bit excited for hockey. Kind of a two-part question here. Number one, when every new coach comes in, he usually has players that he tends to fall in love with and those that fall out of favor with him. I know Noah Cates has been mentioned as a guy that Tortorella may grow to like, but who else, if any, do you think he's going to form a bond with of the new players? And who are some of the guys that might fall out of favor quickly? And that leads to my second part of the question. What role, if any, does James Van Riemsdyk fill on this team this year? If they can't trade him or get rid of him outright, where exactly does he fit in the mix of the 2022-23 Flyers? Thanks.
You know, Sean, I don't know if you're on here. I haven't seen your name pop up. If you have commented on anything, I haven't seen it, but you may still be here. You know, look, I personally I think that's a great question. You know, I think a lot of it is who is necessarily going to mesh well with Torts and the new staff. As for, you know, who will mesh well, I think realistically anybody that will play with an edge. If I had to pick a certain guy, and you know, I know you mentioned Cates in your question, you know, but I agree with that. I do think Cates is a guy that will really mesh well with any coach. But if I were to mesh, you know, a player with Torts, I honestly think it could be Morgan Frost. I think Travis Konechny is another one. Look, I think some of the guys are obvious, like obviously Atkinson, right? I mean, he's played with them before, or excuse me, played for him before. You know, it's not like he isn't used to, you know, the things that Tortorella did, right? So I kind of look at it like, okay, you know, Torts, that's fine. I feel like majority of, you know, what's going to happen throughout the year is probably going to be trying to get guys, you know, it's probably going to be guys essentially, you know, I guess you could say more of, I guess you could say it's more of guys trying to fit in with the right system and also making sure that they're, you know, playing at the right type of pace, if that makes sense. Like you don't want to make, you know, you don't want to have players that are not in the right mix or guys that are, you know, maybe struggling or what, because at that point, then it gets a little harder to kind of get everybody kind of back in line. If one guy is struggling, like it's, you know, to me, it's a good thing when you have certain players that you can put, you know, if a guy's struggling, you can put it with another. You know, Couturier, for example, he is a guy that, you know, generally Coots is a guy that you really can put him with anyone and end up actually playing better. You know, it's more of, you know, if say I remember a couple years ago, JVR and Voracek were struggling at the beginning of 1920, and when they put AV ended up putting them with Couturier when they split up the line with him and Lindblom and Konechny, that line that was really hot to start the year. And when they did that, it was a little tough at first, but Jake and JVR ended up starting to play better. So look, when you have guys that are able to kind of go off of each other and play at the kind of same type of pace, and, you know, when you have certain players that are able to just, you know, kind of go right into it and just, you know, have that flow for each other and just be able to kind of play, I think that'll more mesh with the system and Torts as well. I know it's kind of a long and kind of a weird answer the way I worded it. But again, when you have younger guys too, I think it's the trying to get the mix of having the good amount of young talent and then also having the mix of veterans. I think the Flyers have a mix of that. You know, they have a mix of vets and they have a mix of younger guys, but it's more on the younger guys now, and you're going to need guys to step up. And the guys who fit in with the system and do the right things are going to be the guys that really strive under Torts. For the most part, you know, when you have you know, a team like this that is coming off of a tougher year, and you know, you're looking for answers, you're looking for the positive things, and you're looking for the right things essentially. You know, you're looking for a change in culture. I mean, you're looking for so many different things, and when you're to me, when you're looking for that, I feel like you're looking for not just good play, but good habits, and the Flyers have to inherit more of those again. And I do think Torts will do that. But I think for more of the hockey side of things too, it'll be more of who essentially can play up to that system and kind of up to par with Torts, and kind of get everything back in check, really. But for the most part, as for JVR, and I know somebody put it in the comments as well. This one comes here. The handle name is Keith Handle. Do you think JVR are going to have a good year? And then Sean also mentioned it in the call as well. And one quick thing I want to mention is when I do read the comments from the stream here, I do have something at the end of the show that I will mention as well about this. But again, kind of going off of it, JVR, again, I think it's more of just getting JVR. And, for him, it was when he came here in 19, when he came back, started that year injured. He was kind of off a little bit. And then once you got into the later stages of the year, he was hot. And I think he ended that year was 27 goals, I believe. 19-20 was kind of in the doghouse a little bit. He wasn't great. And then he obviously majority of the guys that year ended up playing pretty well because the team was so good. But again, the year after that, 2020-21, in the shortened season, he wasn't really, he was actually pretty good that year. I believe he was second on the team in scoring. I feel like he kind of took a little bit to kind of get off in the beginning, but as the season went on, he was much better. And then obviously this past year, I almost got not this past year, but the following year mixed up. And then this past year, he wasn't great. So it's in that like kind of odd number year where JVR should have a good season. And if he does, then, the Flyers will obviously benefit from that, but he's just going to get picked apart the entire year because he was supposed to be the guy that was supposed to get moved out and was supposed to end up, getting Johnny Gaudreau. Now, I personally won't be doing that with JVR. I'm not like that. I don't, just pick out guys for the sake of like, just picking them out because they were supposed to get moved or whatever. But again, I feel like for the most part, again, if whoever really meshes well and whoever has a solid year, I guess you could say. And again, if the Flyers power play gets better, that'll probably be better for JVR as well because he'll most likely be on the power play. I should say first power play unit. That would be my guess. That's probably how they'll do it from the start. But again, I do think for the most part that JVR should have a solid year again if everything goes right and they play pretty well. Now I don't know how many goals he'll get. If JVR could give them 15 goals, I'd be happy because I don't know how much he's going to play and I don't really know how he's going to be used because again it's a whole kind of different mindset. I'd like to think it's a little similar where essentially you have the mix of vets and the mix of younger guys. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I do think, and I'm hoping that JVR at least has a solid year. But again, kind of give JVR a break. Hopefully Torts will straighten him out. Yeah, I hope so too, Jeffrey. And again, one other thing here, we have the rookie camp and the rookie games coming up here in a week. Rookie camp starts this upcoming Thursday, the 15th. I will be at rookie camp as well. And as for the Beyond the Boards and then the games, so the Beyond the Boards has been kind of out a little bit already. We've seen the first episode. I actually really enjoyed the first episode with Wade Allison. I don't know if any of you guys watched it, but I thought it was pretty good. As for the games, you have the 16th and 17th at PPL Center in Allentown. I thought both of them, as for those games, I will be at the one. I'm really hoping for some really good rookie games. I know last year's rookie game was kind of unfortunate because you had Allison get hurt and then you had so many. That game was actually pretty chippy throughout most of it. And I think I remember years ago there were some of the rookie games were like bloodbaths. There were just so many hits and fights and all that stuff when the Flyers used to play the Capitals. And I remember hearing that story. I believe it was development camp this past summer. But again, the rookie games, you can get tickets if anybody wants to travel, or if you live anywhere near Allentown. I'm about two. I think I'm like 2.5 hours from there, so it's not too bad. But again, I will be going to the one, and in a couple weeks we do have some more guests. I have Bob Roadtruck lined up, Jim Jackson as well. So really excited for those. Yeah, I'm really look, as bad as people think the Flyers are going to be, I'm still very excited for this team in the foreseeable future, and for these couple months here. We got a couple weeks, but again, once we kind of hit the rookie games, it's going to be pretty quick. So again, we have Dave Jackson coming on now for the again, this interview is around 45 minutes or so. So again, it's going to be a lot of fun here. Let me pull up this video here. We can get this rolling. So what is up, everyone? Welcome back. Oh, not yet. Yeah. So again, seriously, thank you guys for calling in, and I hope you all enjoy the interview. To the show here, and today on the Start Back Up of the show, I have Dave Jackson, who, as many of you probably know from watching hockey on ESPN, and these past couple of years, Dave is now working for ESPN as the rules analyst. He was, I believe, 28 years as a ref, right, Dave?
I was 32 years, 29 under contract with the NHL, okay, and 26 years full-time NHL.
Okay. Yeah, so again, regardless, a long time, regardless of the numbers. 2014 Sochi Olympics, 83 playoff games, two-time Stanley Cup Conference Finals appearance, over 1,500 NHL games worked, which I believe is still a record, is sixth in NHL history. Dave Jackson, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So again, kind of like what I was saying to you before we started, a lot of what I like to do with these is kind of go back into your time, and I did some digging. For you started at 14, right, in your hometown arena in Point Claire.
In Point Claire.
And I believe you started as a linesman. Is that right?
A bit of both. I mean,
okay,
when you're 14 years old, you're doing squared hockey, and it's two-man system, really. You're calling both penalties and being a linesman. Then you become a linesman in a three-man system, and then you become a referee. But my goal back then was still to be a player. I still wanted to be a NHL hockey player, which,
right,
when you're 14, you still think you have the dream still alive.
Right. No, for sure. And that's the thing. I remember, like, as a kid, like being like outside, like, I mean, and right now at 19, I can't even skate. So thinking of it back then, like trying to, think like, oh, maybe one day I'll make the NHL, and obviously never happened. Now I do this stuff. But again, kind of going back from again, when you started, how did you kind of get into being an official and kind of, starting into that? Obviously, I'd assume obviously hockey was always part of your life, I would assume.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you grew up in Montreal, you're on skates when you're 2 years old,
right? And
playing outdoor rinks all the time. And I had a paper route where I had to deliver the paper by 6 a.m. or by 7 a.m. And I hated it. So a buddy of mine said, "Hey, on your days off, come referee." Like, I was playing hockey. I was playing high school hockey and city hockey as well.
Mm-hmm.
But even back, I mean, we're talking the 70s, early 80s. You were only on the ice 3, maybe 4 days a week. So there was always 2 or 3 days you had to go referee hockey if you wanted.
Right.
And I was making more money doing that than I did on a paper route. So I kept playing hockey until I was 18. Obviously I didn't get drafted. I wasn't good enough. I didn't get a scholarship. So I just went to college and I kept refereeing as just a way to make money. Like, never really focusing on, I want to be an NHL referee.
Right.
But once I got to major junior, in the queue, I was actually a linesman starting off in the queue. But I realized this was, it's like minor pro hockey,
right?
Major junior, and I was lucky enough to go to a referee school. Ron Fournier, retired NHL referee, had a referee schooling up in northern Quebec, and I went to it. normally if you're a major junior referee, you wouldn't go to referee school, but I heard they were going to send a director of development to sort of scout. And I went there and I was head and shoulders. It was mostly beginners that were at this school.
Yeah.
So he saw me and I stood out. So asked me to training camps. If you'd be interested in coming to the NHL training camp, I said, yeah, sign me up. I went to camp. I was 21 years old and I stayed there till, till I was 53.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of that, over the years, like it seems like that, you've had a pretty good career. Are there any moments that always stick out to you? Any favorite moments that you have? Is there anything that you can kind of pinpoint, or is it all just kind of one big moment? And
no, I mean, I could probably write down 10 or 15 major mile. Obviously, first NHL training camp.
Right.
You show up there and people aren't into referees. They wouldn't even give it a second thought. But once you start really trying to make a career out of it, and you go to training camp, and all of a sudden you're there with Don Koharski and Bill McCreary, Paul Stewart, Dan Marawelli. I mean, these are guys you've been watching on TV for the last few years, and you're saying, right. Wow, how cool is that? And then obviously when you get your first NHL game, that's probably a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for you, that was December 22nd, 1990.
That's right. It was in Quebec City. So close enough to Montreal that there's a little less pressure than working at Montreal Forum for me.
Yeah.
But close enough so my family could still attend. And a lot of my buddies, a lot of friends, drove up, and that was pretty neat. Obviously, first game in the Montreal Forum, first playoff game, first game 7, Sochi Olympics. It's just there's just a whole bunch of things. 2 All-Star games, which nobody thinks of All-Star games as being intense or really
having to call a lot of penalties,
compelling hockey or anything, but you have the ability to bring your family and to see your kids be able to sort of have the run of the rink and get autographs and meet players and just be part of the show, and they can experience a bit what you take for granted day in, day out, and you miss all that stuff with your family. So it's like a reward for your family to be able to come with you and enjoy that weekend.
No, for sure. And especially for you being honored at that game as well, back in 2018. But I wanted to go back to your first game. I actually did some digging on that, and I looked at the score sheet, and there was 20 penalties called on that game.
Okay.
2 fights, couple game misconducts, elbows, couple roughing calls. Devils ended up winning that game 4-1. But is there anything that you remember that stands out from that game?
Yeah, Guy Lafleur was on the starting lineup. And as a kid growing up in Montreal in the 70s,
yeah, right.
Guy Lafleur was, he was the guy.
Was he your favorite player growing up?
I had many different favorite players. They were pretty much all the superstars. I mean, guys that I came to know, guys that, ended up yelling at me. You got Bobby Clark, you got Phil Esposito. On the Canadians, I could name 10 that are all the Hall of Famers of that era were all guys, look at the Islanders, Brian Troutse, Mike Bossy, Dennis Potvin. I mean, there's just so many guys, but for me, Guy Lafleur was a legend in Quebec, and he was playing for the Nordiques at this time and on the starting lineup, and I skated around beside him and just kind of nodded at him. I was a little bit intimidated to even talk to the guy. And so that was a big deal. And then when he skated by me and his hair blowing in the wind, that's when my stomach kind of dropped, and I went, oh wow, I'm really here.
Yeah.
And I stayed really nervous until I called my first penalty, which is probably 5 minutes into the game, and then I kind of settled down, relaxed, and got through it.
Yeah, and again, I was looking at that after. It actually was a couple minutes ago, right before we started, and I went and I looked at the score. I was like, oh my god, there's a lot of penalties in here. But for you, like, again, kind of going off that, and as you were able to kind of not be as nervous that you called that first penalty, how did you like to call a game? Was it more of trying to figure out the flow of the game first, or did you try to maybe get one early or anything like that, or did you just kind of let the game kind of go from there?
Well, early in my career, I just tried not to get fired. But you got to remember, when I started, it was one referee,
right?
And our standard was much different.
Yeah.
And it's meant so much as who you were. So if you were a rookie referee versus a Don Koharski or a Andy Van Helmen or Bill McCreary, those guys could go into a game, let some stuff go,
Right.
and then decide, well, okay, the players they're not playing for me. They're being idiots, so they can reel the game back in.
Right.
A rookie can't really do that. You start letting the game get out of hand, you try and
It's
reel it back in, and they wouldn't have the respect for you trying to reel it back in. So I think as a young rookie back in the 90s, you had to come out and call more penalties than a veteran would. You didn't have the luxury of sort of letting the guys play. So early in your career, you became known as, well, maybe this guy doesn't have the judgment of a veteran because he calls too many penalties. Because people, honestly, there weren't a lot of penalties called back in the day.
Right.
Then you become more comfortable with the game, and then even today, you don't want to go looking for penalties. You want them to come to you. You want to let the penalties come to you, but make sure you don't miss one when it comes to you, because that's when frustration sets in. So, yeah, I mean, I think my standard changed. The more,
especially starting in the 90s, right?
Yeah, then the more of a veteran you become, your standard becomes a little better. You know what is a penalty, what isn't a penalty, and I mean it's all new to you. I mean it's a lot different than junior hockey.
Was that like, I guess kind of going off that, like when you started, was that more trying? I guess the calls that you were maybe trying to make, was that more like ticky tack stuff, or was it just like kind of just the blatant, like, okay, that's a penalty, I got to call that?
Well, you always call the blatant penalties. I mean, I think nobody struggles with that, but it used to be. I mean, if you look at the contrast between today's game, where if there's a penalty late in the game, everybody expects that to be called. And when it's not called, they're scratching their heads going like, come on, man, like that was a scoring chance. You need to call that. Back when I started, late in the game was considered.
You don't call a penalty, right?
Halfway through the second period was late in the game. and literally, I mean, if a guy didn't go down when the guy was getting hooked or held, I mean, I can remember Mario Lemieux. Mario Lemieux used to carry two guys on his back going on the net, but he wouldn't go down. There wouldn't be a penalty called. And so as a young referee coming in, you had to kind of realize, well, you watch the veterans and what's the standard? What do they call? What do they let go? And how do the players and teams react to that? And of course, there's a supervisory staff, and they'll come down and let you know after the game if you're on standard, if you're not on standard. But coming out of junior hockey you're refereeing kids essentially, and now you're refereeing men. There's a steep sharp learning curve, and sometimes you don't get it right away, and you do call. I say ticky-tacky stuff. In today's game, everybody would go, yeah, those are penalties. But back in the 90s, they'd be considered ticky-tacky stuff. I mean, yeah, sure, you hooked him, but he didn't lose the puck and he didn't go down, so you shouldn't call that. And that's it's really interesting how the philosophy has changed in 30 years.
No, for sure. And again, it's funny you say that, because a couple of weeks ago I was watching, like, sometimes on YouTube, like during the summer, I'll just watch like old NHL games, whether it's the Flyers or anything else, and just the difference of the things that were let go and certain rules that are in the game now that weren't, or actually the other way around, that were in the game back then but aren't now. But again, kind of going off of that, is there any way for you to maybe describe? I mean, obviously you're a couple years out of it now, and obviously doing work for ESPN, but is there a way now that you can describe to people maybe how hard the job is? Is there ever like a description for that for you, or no? Or have you really been trying to figure that out?
Well, I try and, I mean, I do a lot of podcasts and radio interviews with ESPN now. Everybody, nobody, like, referees are villainized. And now, because I guess I'm a pioneer as far as hockey goes, they've never really had somebody on TV who does, and Don Koharski does it as well. And they've never really had anybody on TV that is able to advocate for the officials. And I certainly don't want to be an apologist for officials, because bad calls get made, calls get missed. And we have to admit that, or we lose credibility. But I don't think until I started tweeting about it, until I started going on the air and talking about it, I don't think people truly realize how tough
the job is.
It is to do today's game. Not just today's game, from the beginning history, from the guys that worked in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, you go out there and we're really the only ones that really care about the integrity of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, players go out there, they can cheat and get away with it, and it helps their team win, they're going to do it. And I don't blame them. That's part of the game. I mean, I think Dale Hunter coined it one time saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And you're going to do whatever the referee lets you get away with, because that's, if the standard's here, and I'm not calling penalties unless they're up here. Well, that's the new standard. Right. So they're not really there. It's kind of like bringing up your children. You need to know what is worth fighting about and what's not worth fighting about. Mm-hmm. But there are games that go really well where everyone's mad at you, and you can leave that rink with your head held high, look in the mirror when you go home and go, I did my job tonight, and I don't care if anybody's mad at me. There's other times where you could leave that rink and both teams kind of go, oh, well, you know what? It was a little loose tonight, but we're good with that. But you look in the mirror, you go, no, I didn't do my job. I didn't do my job. I let the game down. I left a bunch of calls out there that if I'm a fan watching the game, I'm wondering why those weren't called. Yeah. Especially new fans. People want to understand the rules in order to appreciate the game and become fans of it. And if you're watching a game and it's called one night and then the next night it's not called, it becomes a little frustrating for the fan. Yeah. And he says, well, I want to like hockey, but I don't understand hockey because I thought that was a penalty, but I saw it tonight and it wasn't a penalty. Right. So I think trying to be consistent. Mm-hmm. And also the other thing we're trying to be consistent is you could be consistently awful. You could call nothing. Right. And that's consistent, but it's not good for the game. Right. So I think more so than being consistent, you need to be true to the standard. And if you can be true to the standard and the players know what the standard is and they know, trusting the referee that any given night, if you do something or something's done against you that is over that standard, the referee's going to call a penalty. Then I think everybody's happy because they know the ground rules and just go out and do that. Work every night. And it's not always easy to work every night. You're tired. Guys travel commercial, day of game. Yeah. Lugging their own equipment around, sometimes having to go find a laundromat to wash their undergarments and stuff. I mean, 3 games in 4 nights, guys are tired. They're beaten down, weather delays. You go out there on the ice, and sometimes the toughest part of the game, people go, you skate you don't get any shifts off. Players, go for 30 seconds off, but players go hard. Yeah. Referees don't necessarily go hard. It's not physically exhausting, it's mentally exhausting. Yeah. It really is.
No, for sure. I mean, and I think that's a great answer because I think a lot of that is kind of misinterpreted today with especially now. I 100% agree with that because I think one of the biggest things from this past year in the playoffs was the Maher goal. And I know that you broke it down a lot, and that was something that everybody was losing their minds, and including myself watching it live was, how is that not offside? But when you actually break the rule down, it does make sense. But again, and you actually touched on a little bit the schedule for you guys. How did that work? Was that kind of more of just like, if you were in one city one night, the closest city, or was it kind of like, say, if you were in Philly, would you work New York, Boston, Washington, or was it like kind of like that, or was it just kind of all over the place?
So you would seldom do back-to-back home games, but you might see the same visiting team back-to-back games, which is quite common. And we would go out on road trips. So in any given month, I'd be on the road approximately 20 days a month. Wow. And I'd do about 12 games in 20 days. And they'd be in bursts of 4 to 5 days, 5 to 6 days. Yeah. Then you're home for a few days and back out. And each trip you'd take, they would regionalize you. So if I'd go to LA for a game, I'd probably go LA, then Anaheim 2 nights later, then maybe back in LA the next night, then up to San Jose, and then home. Okay. And then you go down to Florida, you do Florida, Tampa, Carolina, up the coast of Washington, maybe Philly, and then you go home. So, you seldom in the same city 2 nights, but you're in that region for the duration of your trip usually. Okay.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, I that's one thing I've always kind of wondered is how does that kind of work with the scheduling? But again, kind of going off that, like obviously the game's changed immensely over the years. How do you kind of look at what were some of the things for you, like when the game was kind of going from the 90s, late 90s, 2000s, and 2010s? What were some of the things that were maybe the bigger learning curves for you guys as refs, trying to kind of call the game a little differently because the game was changing over time?
Well, as I touched on earlier,
Mhm.
Biggest sea change was going from finding a reason not to call a penalty
Yeah.
to calling a penalty. Like now you're expected to call penalties. There's a rule book, there's a standard. They expect you to call penalties. In the past, I'm saying 80s, 90s, up till early 2000s, it was, well, you call a penalty when you had no other choice. Otherwise, let the players decide the game. And I love the lyric from the Rush song that if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So by not calling a penalty, you're just you're benefiting the team that decides to cheat.
Right. No,
And
go ahead. Yeah.
that's just unfortunate that the game was played that way, but it was accepted by everybody, and it was great hockey. It really was.
Yeah.
But I think what you did was you marginalized the good players because they couldn't showcase their talent, and the players that were in the league, because they were able to shut guys down and hook them and hold them and all that, well, you were rewarding them. And nowadays we want to see the stars shine. I mean, and it allows guys that are small, you know, the Johnny Gaudreaus, people like him that have so much talent that probably would not have been given a chance in the 80s and 90s.
And the league is so much smaller today too.
Yeah, but so much faster.
Right.
I mean, the speed and the body checks are just as big, if not bigger, because there's no more red line for two-line pass. Right. So guys are coming out of that zone full speed, getting that puck in full speed. They're not slowing down for the two-line pass. They're going full speed and they got their head down. They're getting rocked. Right. So I think it's a great combination of speed and physicality. I mean, I really do. I think the game is like, I'm not sure I could keep up with it anymore, especially there's no way one referee could.
Right.
It's just too fast end to end. Two referees, you still got to be great skaters up and back. And I've been out 4 years now. I don't think being out 4 years, I could step on the ice and do a game. I really don't.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. And you know, to me that there's three things that seems like everybody kind of loses their mind over now. And that's the offside rule, hits to the head, or the goal interference, or, you know, pucks in the crease, there's a scrum, all that stuff.
Yep.
How does that kind of work out when you guys are trying to essentially, like, what are you looking for, you know, okay, let's kind of break it down, I guess. So for a scrum in front of the net, and there's 4, 5, 6 guys in front and the puck's loose, and then what are some of the things that you're trying to look for? Is it more just the puck, maybe positioning, goaltender not being able to play? Does all that kind of come into play?
So with two referees, it's both good and bad. When there was one referee and you were on the goal line, you sort of had to divide your attention between where's the puck and who's bumping who. With two referees, you now have a second set of eyes to help you. Unfortunately, that set of eyes there at the blue line. And linesmen can also assist in a goalie interference call, what they saw. Video has obviously helped a ton, but it's also been a source of, you know, debate. Do we have too many reviews now? Have we broken it down too fine? But if you're a referee on the ice, for me anyways, and I explained this, we had a sort of a summit my final year at the All-Star game about how do we get the goalie interference rule to where everybody sort of understands it. And I was speaking, and, you know, hockey ops was there, a few coaches, some GMs were there. And I said, for me personally, when I look at a goal being scored, it has to jump out at me that, wow, that's not a hockey goal. So when there's a battle for that puck, and people don't seem to understand this, that if that puck is in the crease, a player can go after a loose puck.
Yeah.
The goalie doesn't get first right on that puck. Attacking players have the equal right to that puck. They just cannot intentionally body check, elbow, slash the goaltender. But if their sticks are on the ice going for that puck, it's anybody's puck. And if I'm the referee looking at that, I'm saying, was the goalie prevented from doing his job, or did the forward just beat him to the puck and put the puck in the net? And that's kind of how you have to look at it. There's a lot of times where a goalie's pal will get bumped, but it's not intentional. And especially when he's outside the blue paint. And a lot of people don't understand that the goal crease is 3-dimensional. Yeah. So that semicircle goes around, but it also goes as high as the crossbar. So because a goaltender might have half his leg pads in the blue, his upper body, if he's down on his knees, his upper body and head are outside the blue paint. He's not considered in the crease if he gets his shoulder bumped, as long as it's not intentional.
Mhm.
He might get bumped and everybody says, well, he was in his crease. No, his shins were in the crease,
Right.
but the bulk of his body, his frame, he was outside the crease, and the contact was not intentional, inadvertent contact, and the guy was trying to play the puck. It's going to be a good goal.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's the thing, because I feel like, again, I feel like a lot of people, again, they don't really understand that sort of rule where, the intent to blow the whistle. That's been another thing that's been for years.
Yep.
And that's the rule, the intent to blow the whistle. But kind of going off that, like offside, right? I know we talked about the Maher goal a little bit. I touched on that. How has the offside kind of changed, and especially the coach's challenge, because that's changed a lot. I don't know if, and I'm curious what your opinion is on this. If the delay a game penalty if the challenge is missed, has that maybe kind of changed the way that the coaches and teams use it, or no, or is that just?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of got three answers for you. Just to clear up, the intent to blow a whistle. Some people don't understand that, and it is if the referee deems the puck is frozen, just because he doesn't get his whistle to his mouth quickly enough, and they bang it loose, and it crosses the goal line before the whistle's blown, the referee can still say no. That puck was covered. So you picture a scenario, and it does happen, to where a referee will get body checked in the corner, and the whistle breaks off. You have a finger thing, but it's welded to the finger thing. The whistle will break off, and that happens once a season, twice a season, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Referee doesn't realize his whistle's gone because he still feels it on his fingers. So picture a situation like that where the puck is clearly frozen. He goes to blow his whistle, and there's no whistle there. Does that mean we allow the goal just because the whistle didn't go?
Yeah. No.
Right? It's referee's intent to blow the whistle.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go back and say, I would have blown my whistle there. It was covered. I'm disallowing that goal. And that's not subject to review.
Right.
You go to the blue line call, and in the old days, the Cale Makar one in the playoffs would probably have been whistled the second he crossed the blue line. He brings that puck across, his teammates still trapped in the zone, the whistle would go. But now the linesmen have realized that with the coach's challenge, we will break that down frame by frame, and we'll actually show needing contact. So some people say, well, are linesmen just making a safety call, and anything close they're waving? That's not the case at all, because I know how much pride these guys have.
Yeah.
And the last thing they want to be is the guy that leads the league in goals being overturned because they missed an offside. Nobody wants that. So they have so much pride that they still try and get every call right to the best of their ability. But what they have done is they've been allowed to use patience. And by that, they don't have to blow the whistle immediately. They can take 1/1000 and then kill it, but they get to analyze it. And in this case here, the linesman analyzed. He goes, I see the puck, and then I see the stick slightly off the ice. Then the guy tags up. He waved it. Now, some people say, well, he got lucky. He missed it and got lucky. I don't think so. I mean, he's a great linesman, Brad Kovacic, and I think he got it right.
Mm-hmm.
And the unintended consequence of video review is that calls that everybody and his brother would have said were offside back in the day are now going to be broken down, and they're going to be good calls.
Yeah.
And guys are going to say, well, that should never have been a goal allowed. Well, yeah, there's no way to disallow that goal. No one touched that puck with a man in offside position.
Yeah.
And I think
because that goal essentially was a 1 second dump in, right?
It was a 1 second dump in, yeah. A 1 second delayed offside. There was no time for him to get his arm in the air for a delayed offside, but it was a half a second delayed offside.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it was. And now, because we have a penalty on a challenge that's not overturned, coaches have to be video coaches have to be really good at what they do. Right. And the ability to come up with those answers really quickly, because it used to be that you'd only lose a timeout, and coaches, well, I'll roll the dice and challenge this.
Right.
But I think now we've got in a good place where they're not just making frivolous challenges. They know what's at stake if they're wrong. And, that's what's going to happen. I think you look at baseball, when they first brought baseball in, video review in baseball,
Yeah.
used to be if there was a collision at the plate and the catcher didn't drop the ball, the guy was out.
Mm-hmm.
But now they brought in video review, and if there's a collision at the plate, if he doesn't actually tag him with the glove, with the ball, if he protects the ball and the shoulder, I think they call him safe.
Right.
And that was not ever the intent of the rule, because the catcher had to protect himself and make sure he didn't drop the ball. But now you want to bring review in? Well, unintended consequences, that got to be safe because he was never tagged.
Right. No, for sure. And again, like that's the thing. I mean, again, like that goal. I mean, the amount of times I think we saw that goal that night over and over and over again. And I heard you say this on another podcast as well, that as many times as you tweeted it out and said that that was a good goal, that people just weren't believing you and were just still giving you crap for it.
It's funny that people there's two sort of groups. There's the groups that think I'm lying,
Yeah,
and I'm just trying to protect the league's butt, and I'm paid by the league to
to say that. Yeah,
explain away their bad calls, and as if I'm a propaganda unit or a propaganda arm of the league, which I'm not.
right.
I don't work for the league. I work for ESPN. I'm not going to compromise my own reputation. And you compromise my network's reputation by saying something that's wrong. And then you get the other group of people that have this whole conspiracy theory that the league doesn't want a certain team to win, or a certain country to win, or they want this other team to win for TV ratings. And what they don't understand is that I watch 160 games a year.
Yeah,
and calls go against every team the same amount of times. Goals get disallowed the same amount of times. The same players on every different team get goals taken away. Calls get missed against teams. Bad calls get made against certain teams.
mm-hmm.
And what they really don't understand is, for the league to want one team to win, that means the league has to convince 31 general managers that they're going to get screwed.
Yeah,
And all 31 GMs have to be in on it, because they are the league. Like, Mr. Bettman's not the league. The 32 GMs and 32 owners are the league. And if the league wants one of them to win, that means the other 31 have to be in on it. It's just not happening.
right. Yeah,
But people don't seem to get that. They're just such diehards.
mm-hmm. No, for sure. And again, I feel like that stuff is always just misinterpreted with how the game is called and things like that. But one other thing I wanted to touch on too was hits to the head. That's been something that's changed a lot. I know there aren't as many tough guys anymore. There's a few to each team. I guess you could say I guess you could probably divide it by a couple by each division.
Yeah.
How is that kind of looked at in the booth? If it's by replay to kind of check if it's a match penalty, or if it's more of say a guy like Tom Wilson, for example, like going into that game, is there anything that you're kind of looking at with Wilson and his reputation? Again, not saying he's a dirty player, but just with everything that's in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, you don't want to prejudge a game.
Right.
You don't want to go into a game and frustrate the teams when both teams might have had an attitude that we're going to go play hockey today. We're not going to get involved in stupid stuff. And then you go out and call a bunch of ticky-tacky penalties, and all of a sudden you're frustrated both teams. You need to let the penalties come to you. But yes, there are players who have earned certain reputations, whether it's fair or not, but you certainly don't prejudge those players.
Yeah.
What you do is, and there's one or two on every team. It's not just Tom Wilson.
Right.
There's guys on every team that sort of have a reputation. And as a referee, what you do is you're just more aware when they're on the ice. But that's no different than, say, a goaltender that has a reputation for diving.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you just want to make sure. So you go, I've got to be aware tonight and not get fooled.
Is that kind of the same thing as sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but is that kind of the same thing as, say, like when Sidney Crosby's on the ice, like, a superstar? Is that kind of a similar thing or no?
Well, I think you look at all skilled players, and every team has a handful of really skilled players.
Yeah.
You want to make sure when they're on the ice that they're the ones that are going to be targeted. You're not getting fourth line centers who are being targeted by their team. It's the skilled players getting targeted. So you just have to be hyper aware that when they have the puck, they're going to draw more attention. So you're focused on that. But going back to reputations, there's centermen that have a reputation for cheating. So linesmen have to go into that game aware that this centerman likes to cheat or likes to spin. You're not going to pick on him, but you're going to be aware of it, and you're going to shut it down before it happens.
Right.
You're going to say, hey, to the centerman, listen, you turned on me that first face off. I threw you out. I'm going to keep throwing you out all night if you keep doing that. So let's work together. And that's the same with any player. Maybe a high hit early that's legal, but it's on the line. You might during a commercial stoppage skate over to the bench and say, listen, that last hit, that was really close to being a high hit. Just be aware, like work with me. I don't want to call a penalty on you.
Right.
And a lot of times that'll work. Like that'll simmer the player down a bit. We only have two options for hits to the head. It's either a 2-minute minor or a match penalty. There's really no gray area in between. And normally what the rule of thumb is, because referees are not doctors, is that a player gets hit and pops back up and it looks kind of bad, they'll probably call 2 minutes. Player gets hit and stays down, he's probably getting a match. But when that's called, then they can go and review it and see if it's justified. If not, they can not rescind it. They can reduce it to 2 minutes, which I think is a great option, because a 5-minute penalty in a game misconduct is a really severe penalty.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, and I think, and the reason I asked too was from watching the World Juniors, obviously different with the IIHF, but it seems like any type of hit that's either a board with the numbers to the glass, or if it's to the head or anything like that, it's reviewed. So I was curious if there's anything like that, but again, going back to what you're saying about, with the players and, talking about throwing guys out of the circle, things like that. I actually pulled this from an article for what NHL players look for in a good referee. And Jacob Trouba said that, and this is from a couple years ago when Trouba was still with Winnipeg. Now he's obviously captain of the New York Rangers. He said one that you can have a good conversation with. He said players will mess up. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes they're wrong, but you can work it out without getting into a screaming match. Is that something that you would agree with?
Absolutely. I think I'm not out there. This game's not about me. The game is about the players on the ice.
Right.
And if I can do my job totally unnoticed by fans and media, and I've been fair and I've kept I always tell young referees, keep the game fair and keep it safe. And if you've done that, when a player comes to you and you've made a call and he's really hot, and you might not be 100% sure you made the right call, there's no sense trying to tell him the sky is green. You might say to him, like, listen, settle down, put your hands down, stop yelling at me. I try and treat disrespect with respect. So if he's yelling at you, there's no point escalating it.
Right.
You want to, my job, you're part of your job is being a psychologist out there. And if I can bring the tone down and say, hey, listen, man, from where I'm standing, that's what I saw. You're telling me that's not what happened? I promise you I'll look at it. And if I was wrong, I'll come to you next period and tell you.
Yeah.
And that usually settles them down. They just want to be heard.
Right.
But for you to put your hand up and say, don't come talk to me, I was right, you're wrong, you're not really establishing a great rapport. I think it's important to work with the players.
No, for sure. And I kind of feel like that kind of ruins again, kind of going off what you said earlier too, that kind of ruins the flow of the game, right? Let the penalties come to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't want to go looking for stuff. And I go back to communication. You look at linesmen, the best linesmen, the guys that work the finals, you might see them throw centermen out 3 or 4 in the first 10 minutes of the game. And the players know that, linesmen aren't going to change. And they work with them though, every face-off. They go, listen, I just tossed you last face-off because you did this. Don't do it again. They do it again. They toss them again. And they talk to them again and say, listen, I'm not going to break. So if you want to keep cheating, you're not going to take a face-off all night. By the third period, they're not tossing a lot of centermen out of the game because they've communicated with them. They've worked with them. They know what they're allowed to do. They get the puck down.
Right. No, for sure. And again, kind of going off that too, like I know we mentioned earlier with referees kind of having that, unfortunately, like that kind of bad reputation. What can you kind of say to people? Like, it seems like that referees are they've been leaving minor hockey. A lot of them, it's been less and less trying to find referees. And I know that hockey in Massachusetts has kind of had a problem with this as well, minor hockey. Has there been is there anything for you that you can maybe say for people to maybe kind of give the the people who are maybe a little hard on referees, maybe to kind of give the refs a little bit more of a chance?
I'd say two different things to that. I think young officials, we need to put more money into supervision. And by that, you imagine signing your kid up for minor hockey and the parents saying, well, who's coaching Johnny this year? And the powers that be go, we're not going to have a coach. We're just going to send them out the ice and hope they learn.
Right.
Right? You'd never do that.
Mm-hmm.
But they do that to a lot of young referees. They sign them up, they give them a clinic, and then they send them out on the ice, and there's nobody there supporting them. You got the parents yelling out.
Yeah. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but sometimes I feel like a lot of it is just kind of like, oh, like a parent comes in, referees or things like that. For me, like, I've never played ice hockey, but I always played street hockey. Yep. And sometimes it was just like, oh, if it can, we don't have a ref, whoever, and somebody would come in. But again, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, you young referee, 13, 14, 15 years old. Yeah. He's got the players yelling at him. He's got the coaches yelling at him. He's got parents yelling at him. If he comes off that ice and there's somebody like myself who was there watching his game, comes down with a list of things he did well, things he did wrong, and said, hey, kid, you did a great job out there tonight. Mm-hmm. The parents that were yelling at you, the coach that were yelling at you, that's on them. You did a great job tonight. You did what we asked of you. You called penalties and you were really good. You keep doing that and you're going to move up the ranks. You're going to be doing better hockey next year. That keeps kids involved. Mm-hmm. Without that, they come off the ice and they believe what they've heard. They say, I'm no good. Everybody hates me. I'm quitting. It's not worth it. Right. And I see that is what you talk about, kids and drugs or crime. And they say, oh, this teacher or this guidance counselor, that's what kept me on the straight and narrow. Right. That's what keeps young officials on the straight and narrow. Support, coaching, mentoring. They stay in the game when they get that. But it comes at a cost. You need to have a supervision budget. Yeah. And for sure. The parents who yell at referees, I've had conversations with some of them and they go, well, listen, he's getting paid. You got to take criticism. And I go, listen, that's fine in the NHL. But the kid's 14 years old. Yeah. Would you go into Dunkin' Donuts, order a coffee with cream, no sugar? You taste it, there's sugar in the coffee. Would you stand up on a table and start berating the kid behind the counter? Yeah. He's getting paid. You wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do that. But for some reason, you put stripes on out on the ice and parents lose their mind. Coaches lose their mind. It's just wrong. No, for sure. No, I agree. It's funny. I always laugh when I see the sign that's like, this is not the NHL, or, for being in Philly, like seeing the players on the ice are not playing for the Flyers, things like that. Right. Exactly. But I again, kind of going off of that, obviously I do more of a Flyers kind of central podcast, things like that. Are there any moments for you from working in Philly? Any stories that you have? Any favorite moments from refereeing in Philadelphia? Well, the spectrum was nuts. Yeah. You felt the fans were just, they were right on top of you. Mm-hmm. You knew it when you made a bad call. Yeah. Or I guess any call against Philly, you knew that the fans weren't very happy. Any call against the Flyers was a bad call. Pretty much every call against the Flyers was a bad call. Yeah. I had my run-ins with Mr. Clark on numerous occasions. He didn't like a lot of the penalties I called against the Flyers. And, early in my career, maybe some of them weren't that good. Mm-hmm. But, I'm sure I made my fair share of good ones. And then we moved over to the new rink, and it wasn't quite as intimidating a building as far as the fans didn't seem to be on top of you as much. Right. But I got to say, and this is a compliment, the passion that the Philly fans show for their team is unmatched. There's some other good buildings in the league, but in my whole, I did NHL games for 28 years, and I'd say the Flyers fans have always been top three of passion and knowledgeable fans as well. Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, and again, I feel like a lot of that is I think I think some people, obviously like you, like, do you understand that? And then there's others that kind of put them in the category of like, oh, like, for the worst fans in the world. But again, kind of go back to yourself a little bit. How did you get the call from ESPN? How did that kind of work out, being the rules analyst?
That was something I think they decided on um, close to the beginning of the season. ESPN does a great job in football, college football, basketball. They have a rules analyst in those, and I believe they were having discussions with the league, with hockey ops, with Mr. Bettman, and it was late in the summer that I got a tip that expect a phone call, and a couple of days later, I got the phone call. We talked about a few things. The job was explained to me. I was honored, but it was right out of left field.
Yeah.
I wasn't even aware they were having a rules analyst.
Oh, okay.
But the people at ESPN, Mark Gross, Mike McQuaid, Vic Morin, these guys had a vision, and they were quite patient with me. I'd never done television before.
Yeah, I was just going to
And
ask you ever do that before.
yeah, never done television before, and they put a studio in my house. Brought me into Bristol. I did on site several times. Did some games live from the press box, especially in the finals. I was all 6 games in the finals in the press box. But
That's awesome.
they worked with me. They gave me carte blanche to say what was on my mind, and just try and inform people. Their goal is to grow the game.
Yeah.
They want to grow the game in the US, and as I said earlier, the key to growing a game is a knowledgeable fan base, and I just try and do my part to educate the fans.
No, for sure. And again, like, there's been a lot of change in recent years with obviously TV and NBC not having their deal, and then also bringing in ESPN, which I personally like. I really did like ESPN. I thought it was really good throughout most of the year. But one last thing here. Did you ever have a favorite building to work in? Was it the Spectrum, or was it any other building?
No. Obviously, growing up as a kid, going to the Montreal Forum, that was a magical place for me to work.
Yeah.
That was really special. Chicago Stadium with the old organ, the old pipe organ, and the national anthem before the game. Those were probably 2 of the coolest buildings. But really, any building with a fan base that just is loud and knowledgeable. A loud building is always fun.
Yeah.
People think that maybe referees get intimidated or something. We're not intimidated. We're accountable to ourselves. We're accountable to the teams on the ice. So really, the crowd yelling at you just fires up your inner fire, and you just want to get the call right.
Right.
But it keeps you motivated. Keeps you focused. I mean, the worst thing is if you were in a building that doesn't have a lot of fans, you've got to keep yourself focused. You got to keep yourself motivated and say, hey, you got to be in this game. I felt so bad for the officials during the COVID era, refereeing in empty buildings. I mean, that's mentally tough.
Yeah.
I'm sure the players said the same thing. It's mentally tough. You get down a few goals and your crowd's not behind you.
Yeah.
It's tough to maybe find that drive, and it's the same. It's human nature.
Yeah.
But when a building's full, when a building's packed, and it's rocking, those are the best games. Those are the most fun to do.
No, for sure. And as a fan and somebody who watches, those are the most fun to watch as well. But again, Dave, seriously, thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it. Best of luck this year with everything for ESPN, and hopefully we can talk soon.
Anytime, Chris.
All right. So there it is. There was Dave Jackson from ESPN. That was a really good interview. Dave gives some great answers. He's very good at explaining things and giving the whole explanation of the different rules and how the game's changed over the years. This will wrap it up here for the show. And one quick thing I did want to mention as well. The show now will be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So as soon as I am done, I will be downloading this episode off of StreamYard, making it an audio file, throwing it up there, and then that will be on there as well. If you missed the live version, you can still go back and watch the full YouTube clip, but if you're on the go and you can't really keep out YouTube, if you want to listen in your car or something like that, you can put it on Apple and Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts as well. So stay tuned for that. I will be tweeting that out as well. And thank you guys all for watching. I really do appreciate all the support, and I will talk to you all again next week.